The Nibelungenlied, translated as the Song of the Nibelungs, is an epic poem in Middle High German. The story tells of dragon slayer Siegfried at the court of the Burgundians, how he was murdered, and of his wife Kriemhild's revenge. The Nibelungenlied is based on pre-Christian Germanic heroic motifs, which include oral traditions and reports based on historic events and individuals of the 5th and 6th centuries. Old Norse parallels of the legend survive in the Volsunga saga, the Prose Edda, the Poetic Edda, the Legend of Nornages, and the Dithrak saga. In 2009, the three main manuscripts of the Nibelungenlied were inscribed in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in recognition of their historical significance. Authorship. Prevailing scholarly theories strongly suggest that the written Nibelungenlied is the work of an anonymous poet from the area of the Danube between Passau and Vienna, dating from about 1180 to 1210, possibly at the court of Wulfgar von Erle, the Bishop of Passau. Most scholars consider it likely that the author was a man of literary and ecclesiastical education at the bishop's court, and that the poem's recipients were the clerics and noblemen at the same court. The Nibelungs Lament, a sort of appendix to the poem proper, mentions a Meister Conrad, who was charged by a bishop, Pilgrim, of Passau with the copying of the text. This is taken as a reference to Saint Pilgrim, Bishop of Passau from 971 to 991. The search for the author of the Nibelungenlied in German studies has a long and intense history. Among the names suggested were Konrad von Fußbrunnen, Liga von Steinich and Walther von der Vogelweide. None of these hypotheses has wide acceptance, and mainstream scholarship today accepts that the author's name cannot be established. Synopsis. Though the preface to the poem promises both joyous and dark tales ahead, the Nibelungenlied is by and large a very tragic work, and these four opening verses are believed to have been a late addition to the text, composed after the body of the poem had been completed. The original version instead began with the introduction of Kriemhild, the protagonist of the work. The epic is divided into two parts, the first dealing with the story of Siegfried and Kriemhild, the wooing of Brunhild and the death of Siegfried at the hands of Hagen, and Hagen's hiding of the Nibelung treasure in the Rhine. The second part deals with Kriemhild's marriage to Etzel, her plans for revenge, the journey of the Burgundians to the court of Etzel, and their last stand in Etzel's hall. Siegfried and Kriemhild. The first chapter introduces the court of Burgundy. Kriemhild has a dream of a falcon that is killed by two eagles. The second chapter tells of the background of Siegfried, Crown Prince of Xanten. His youth is narrated with little room for the adventures later attributed to him. In the third chapter, Siegfried arrives in Worms with the hopes of wooing Kriemhild. Upon his arrival, Hagen von Tronje, one of King Gunther's vassals, tells Gunther about Siegfried's youthful exploits that involved winning a treasure and lands from a pair of brothers, Nibelung and Schilbung, whom Siegfried had killed when he was unable to divide the treasure between them in, almost incidentally, the killing of a dragon. Siegfried leaves his treasure in the charge of a dwarf named Alberic. After killing the dragon, Siegfried then bathed in its blood, which rendered him invulnerable. Unfortunately for Siegfried, a leaf fell onto his back from a linden tree. In spite of Hagen's threatening stories about his youth, the Burgundians welcome him, but do not allow him to meet the princess. Disappointed, he nonetheless remains in Worms and helps Gunther defeat the invading Saxons. In Chapter 5, Siegfried finally meets Kriemhild. Gunther requests Siegfried to sail with him to the fictional city of Eisenstein in Iceland to win the hand of Iceland's queen, Brunhild. Siegfried agrees, though only if Gunther allows him to marry Gunther's sister, Kriemhild, whom Siegfried pines for. Gunther, Siegfried and a group of Burgundians set sail for Iceland with Siegfried pretending to be Gunther's vassal. Upon their arrival, Brunhild challenges Gunther to a trial of strength with her hand in marriage as a reward. If they lose, however, they will be sentenced to death. She challenges Gunther to 3 athletic contests, throwing a javelin, tossing a boulder, and a leap. After seeing the boulder and javelin, it becomes apparent to the group that Brunhild is immensely strong and they fear for their lives. Siegfried quietly returns to the boat on which his group had sailed and retrieves his special cloak, which renders him invisible and gives him the strength of 12 men. Siegfried, with his immense strength, invisibly leads Gunther through the trials. Unknowingly deceived, the impressed Brunhild thinks King Gunther, not Siegfried, defeated her and agrees to marry Gunther. Gunther becomes afraid that Brunhild may yet be planning to kill them, so Siegfried goes to Nibelungenlied and single-handedly conquers the kingdom. Siegfried makes them his vassals and returns with 1,000 of them, himself going ahead as messenger. The group of Burgundians, Gunther and Gunther's new wife-to-be Brunhild, return to Worms, where a grand reception awaits them and they marry to much fanfare. Siegfried and Kriemhild are also then married with Gunther's blessings. However, on their wedding night, Brunhild suspects something is amiss with her situation, particularly suspecting Siegfried as a potential cause. Gunther attempts to sleep with her and, with her great strength, she easily ties him up and leaves him that way all night. After he tells Siegfried of this, Siegfried again offers his help, proposing that he slip into the chamber at night with his invisibility cloak and silently beat Brunhild into submission. Gunther agrees but says that Siegfried must not sleep with Brunhild. Siegfried slips into the room according to plan and after a difficult and violent struggle, an invisible Siegfried defeats Brunhild. Siegfried then takes her ring and belt, which are symbols of defloration. Here it is implied that Siegfried sleeps with Brunhild, despite Gunther's request. Afterwards, Brunhild no longer possesses her once great strength and says she will no longer refuse Gunther. Siegfried gives the ring and belt to his own newlywed, Kriemhild, in Chapter 10. Years later, Brunhild, still feeling as if she had been lied to, goads Gunther into inviting Siegfried and Kriemhild to their kingdom. Brunhild does this because she is still under the impression that Gunther married off his sister to a low-ranking vassal, yet the normal procedures are not being followed between the two ranks, combined with her lingering feelings of suspicion. Both Siegfried and Kriemhild come to Worms and all is friendly between the two until, before entering Worms Cathedral, Kriemhild and Brunhild argue over who should have precedence according to their husbands' perceived ranks. Having been earlier deceived about the relationship between Siegfried and Gunther, Brunhild thinks it is obvious that she should go first, through custom of her perceived social rank. Kriemhild, unaware of the deception involved in Brunhild's wooing, insists that they are of equal rank and the dispute escalates. Severely angered, Kriemhild shows Brunhild first the ring and then the belt that Siegfried took from Brunhild on her wedding night, and then calls her Siegfried's Kebs. Brunhild feels greatly distressed and humiliated, and bursts into tears. The argument between the queens is both a risk for the marriage of Gunther and Brunhild and a potential cause for a lethal rivalry between Gunther and Siegfried, which both Gunther and Siegfried attempt to avoid. Gunther acquits Siegfried of the charges. Despite this, Hagen von Tronje decides to kill Siegfried to protect the honor and reign of his king. Although it is Hagen who does the deed, Gunther, who at first objects to the plot, along with his brothers knows of the plan and quietly assents. Hagen contrives a false military threat to Gunther, and Siegfried, considering Gunther a great friend, volunteers to help Gunther once again. Under the pretext of this threat of war, Hagen persuades Kriemhild, who still trusts Hagen, to mark Siegfried's single vulnerable point on his clothing with a cross under the premise of protecting him. Now knowing Siegfried's weakness, the fake campaign is called off and Hagen then uses the cross as a target on a hunting trip, killing Siegfried with a javelin as he is drinking from a brook. Kriemhild becomes aware of Hagen's deed when, in Hagen's presence, the corpse of Siegfried bleeds at the site of the wound. This perfidious murder is particularly dishonorable in medieval thought. as throwing a javelin is the manner in which one might slaughter a wild beast, not a knight. We see this in other literature of the period, such as with Parsifal's unwittingly dishonorable crime of combating and slaying knights with a javelin. Further dishonoring Siegfried, Hagen steals the hoard from Kriemhild and throws it into the Rhine, to prevent Kriemhild from using it to establish an army of her own. Kriemhild's revenge. Kriemhild swears to take revenge for the murder of her husband and the theft of her treasure. Many years later, King Etzel of the Huns proposes to Kriemhild. She journeys to the land of the Huns, and they are married. For the baptism of their son, she invites her brothers, the Burgundians, to a feast at Etzel's castle in Hungary. Hagen does not want to go, suspecting that it is a trick by Kriemhild in order to take revenge and kill the man, but is taunted until he does. As the Burgundians cross the Danube, this fate is confirmed by Nixes, who predict that all but one monk will die. Hagen tries to drown the monk in order to render the prophecy futile, but he survives. The Burgundians arrive at Etzel's castle and are welcomed by Kriemhild with lying smiles and graces, but the Lord Dietrich of Bern, an ally of Etzel's, advises the Burgundians to keep their weapons with them at all times, which is normally not allowed. The tragedy unfolds as Kriemhild comes before Hagen, reproaching him for her husband Siegfried's death, and demands that he return her Nibelungenschatz. Hagen answers her boldly, admitting that he killed Siegfried and sank the Nibelungen treasure into the Rhine, but blames these acts on Kriemhild's own behavior. King Etzel then welcomes his wife's brothers warmly. But outside a tense feast in the Great Hall, a fight breaks out between Huns and Burgundians, and soon there is general mayhem. When word of the fight arrives at the feast, Hagen decapitates the young son of Kriemhild and Etzel before their eyes. The Burgundians take control of the hall, which is besieged by Etzel's warriors. Kriemhild offers her brothers their lives if they hand over Hagen, but they refuse. The battle lasts all day, until the queen orders the hall to be burned with the Burgundians inside. All of the Burgundians are killed except for Hagen and Gunther, who are bound and held prisoner by Dietrich of Bern. Kriemhild has the men brought before her and orders her brother Gunther to be killed. Even after seeing Gunther's head, Hagen refuses to tell the queen what he has done with the Nibelungen treasure. Furious, Kriemhild herself cuts off Hagen's head. Old Hildebrand, the mentor of Dietrich of Bern, is infuriated by the shameful deaths of the Burgundian guests. He hews Kriemhild to pieces with his sword. In a 15th century manuscript, he is said to strike Kriemhild a single clean blow to the waist. She feels no pain, however, and declares that his sword is useless. Hildebrand then drops a ring and commands Kriemhild to pick it up. As she bends down, her body falls into pieces. Dietrich and Etzel and all the people of the court lament the deaths of so many heroes. Historical background. The historical core of the saga is the defeat of the Burgundians by Flavius Aetius with the aid of Hunnic mercenaries near Worms, California, AD 436. Other possible influences are the feud between the 6th century Merovingian queens Brunhilde and Fredegunda, as well as the marriage of Attila with the Burgundian princess Ildiko in AD 453, which took place the day before his death. From the evidence of Waltharius, Nibelung is a name for the Franks, although there are other uses of the name in other medieval texts. The first part of the Nibelungenlied deals with Gunther's wooing of Brunhild and the murder of Siegfried, which takes place in Worms. The second part describes the journey of the Nibelungs east across the Danube to Etzelburg, the residence of Attila the Hun, and the location of the final catastrophe. The Nibelungenlied arranges these traditional materials in a composition aiming at a high medieval audience, casting the inherited Germanic theme in a critical view of contemporary chivalry. Consequently, Siegfried changes from a dragon killer to a courtly man who will express his love to Kriemhild explicitly only after he has won the friendship of the Burgundian king Gunther and his brothers, Gernot and Gisela. Some situations, which exaggerate the conflict between the Germanic migrations and the chivalrous ethics, may be interpreted as irony. The notoriously bloody end that leaves no hope for reconciliation is far removed from the happy ending of typical courtly epics, but is probably part of the original story. The bloody conclusion is also part of the overall critical dimension of the work. Some scholars, particularly Delbruck, consider the historical figure of Arminius, who defeated the Roman imperial legions at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 09 AD, a possible archetype for the dragon slayer Siegfried. Legacy. An early critic labeled it a German Iliad, arguing that, like the Greek epic, it goes back to the remotest times and unites the monumental fragments of half-forgotten myths and historical personages into a poem that is essentially national in character. Imagery from the Nibelungenlied was used in many poems, essays, posters and speeches at every stage in the development of German nationalism, from the Befreiungskriege to the regime of National Socialism, to less jingoistic interpretations and references today. For example, the faithfulness among the Burgundian king and his vassals, ranked higher than family bonds or life, is called Nibelungentreue. This expression was used in Germany, prior to World War I, to describe the alliance between the German Empire and Austria-Hungary, as well as trying to inspire the army when referring to the Battle of Stalingrad. The word Nibelungen is applied to the followers of Siegfried and finally to the Burgundians which are portrayed in the poem. Today it is very difficult to separate the influence of the Nibelungenlied itself from that of other works of art and propaganda dealing with the Siegfried myths. Often, images which clearly refer to part of this story differ in some way. For example, one famous poster from the 1930s links Siegfried's death with the Dolchstoss legend and shows a Siegfried-like figure stabbed with a dagger, not a spear. Adaptations. The Nibelungenlied, Theodrek's Saga and the Volsunga Saga served as source materials for Richard Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen, a series of 4 music dramas popularly known as the Ring Cycle. In 1924, Austrian director Fritz Lang made a duology of silent fantasy films of the epic Die Nibelungen, Siegfried and Die Nibelungen. Kriemhild's Rache. Lang and Thea von Haber wrote the screenplay for the first film. Von Haber has the sole screenwriting credit on the second. Margarete Schorn portrayed Kriemhild, Paul Richter portrayed Siegfried, and Hannah Ralph portrayed Brunhild. A 2-part remake was made in 1966. The premise of the Nibelungenlied was made into a mini-series called Ring of the Nibelungs in 2004. It adapts the title of the operatic series by Wagner and, like Der Ring des Nibelungen, is in many ways closer to the Norse legends of Sigurd and Brynhild than to the Nibelungenlied itself. Like many adaptations, it deals only with the first half of the epic, ignoring Kriemhild's revenge. On the Sci-Fi Channel, it is broadcast with title Dark Kingdom, The Dragon King. Editions. Karl Bach, Der Nibelungenlied, mit den Abweichungen von der Nibelungenlied, den Lesarten samtliche Handschriften und einem Wörterbuch, Leipzig, F.A. Brockhaus, 1870–1880. Michael S. Batz. Das Nibelungenlied, Critical Edition, Tübingen. M. Niemeyer, 1971. ISBN 3-484-10149-0. Helmut de Boer. Das Nibelungenlied, 22nd Revised and Expanded Edition, ed. Roswitha Wisniewski, Wiesbaden 1988, ISBN 3-7653-03739. This edition is based ultimately on that of Bach. Hermann Reichert, Das Nibelungenlied, Berlin. De Gruyter 2005. 7. ISBN 3-11-018423-0. Edition of Manuscript B. Normalized Text. Introduction in German. Hermann Reichert, Nibelungenlied Lehrwerk. Sprachliche Kommentar. Mittelhochdeutsche Grammatik. Wörterbuch. Passen zum Text der Street. Gale Fassung. Wien. Presens Verlag 2007. ISBN 978-3-7069-04452. Linguistic Help for Beginners. Ursula Schulze, Das Nibelungenlied, based on manuscript C. Dusseldorf, Zurich. Artemis and Winkler 2005. ISBN 3-538-06990-5.